What's up everybody, Greg here with Lensprotogo and Lens Rentals, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to get a cinematic interview lighting setup just like the one you're looking at right now, shooting against a plain wall. Now let's back up to the beginning and I'll show you how we got this look. All right, so we're back at the beginning here. We have our plain wall behind me, which is just a plain gray wall. It's about 11 feet across, and we're going to be shooting our interview on this setup. Now the camera that we're going to be using is the Blackmagic Pocket 6K, and we're shooting that in 6K with RAW, so we have a little bit of flexibility in post for color grading. And then we're going to be using the Sigma 18 to 35 millimeter for our lens, shooting at about 18 millimeters. So getting that really wide field of view, because it, to me, makes it a little more intimate with the person that you're interviewing or whoever's talking on camera. Now when I'm looking at the placement for this camera, the one thing I want to figure out, because I'm shooting 18 millimeters, is how far back can I get from this wall to keep that like depth while still only keeping the wall in the frame and not seeing things on the outer edges. So I'm just going to be looking in the background here. It's pretty dark. Let's brighten this up just so we can see. Battery's about to die. And we want to get, so this one you can see a little bit on the edges. We'll just move it in until we can't see outside of this gray wall anymore. So that looks pretty good right there. Now the next thing that we're gonna do is go ahead and grab our talent, and we're gonna bring our talent in to get them placed for our wide shot. We're gonna do a wide shot first so that we can light for that, and then when we move in for the close-up, it's gonna be easier to get that shot and sort of do a little bit of a relight. So let's grab this chair, and we're gonna bring that in. Now normally you'd have a talent come sit in, but my talent is shooting on the camera right now. But probably about here, I'm guessing this is about the depth. This is about the distance that we're going to get sort of a medium wide shot, maybe showing a little bit of waist to the top of the head, if that's roughly it. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So now we got our camera set up, we got it framed up for our talent, which is going to be sitting in this chair. The next thing that we're going to do is bring in our key light, which is going to be our main light for our talent. Now for this look, we wanted to go with a little bit of a sort of toppy, moodier look. So we're going to bring in that light and probably put it either right above here, just so we're getting that like direct down light, or maybe a little bit offside so we get a little more light into the eyes. We'll have to kind of play around with that once we get it up. Let's go grab that light. So for this one, we're going to be using the Westcott Flex 2x2. This is the bicolor version, but we're going to be shooting with it in tungsten. So we get this over here. All right, so we're getting ready to set up the 2x2 flex panel on a stand, but because we want it sort of that overhead toppy style, we don't want to have the stand in the shot, so we're going to boom it out using a long arm just like this one. Now you want to make sure that you are rigging to the right, which means having your tightening handle on the right so that when the weight's out here, it's going to be tightening it and it's not going to fall onto your talent. The other thing you want to make sure is that the weight is going over one of the legs of the stand. And then you also want to put sandbags on those stands so that it's not going to tip over and fall onto your talent. So we're just going to grab a couple heavy ones here, throw it on the back and on the tall leg. All right, let's power that up, see what it looks like. All right, so we got our first light set up, which is the Westcott Flex 2x2. This is the overhead light right here. And as you can see, we're getting a lot of exposure on my face, but it's also spilling kind of all over the place. We're getting a lot on the background, as well as just like bouncing all around, bouncing off the ground, and filling in my face. We want to really get that directional light. So what we're gonna do is throw on a grid, which is really gonna isolate that light to our subject. All right, so we got the 2x2 grid here. Super easy to put on. It's just a little Velcro that goes on the inside of this barn door. Start up here and just sort of work our way around. And as you can already see, it's already cutting the light off of that background, which is what we want to do and really focus it on our subject. Nice. A little more. All right, so sitting back down into this shot again, as you can see, this light is now a lot more focused on our subject and not as much on the background, which is giving us a really nice look. The next thing that we need to look at is adjusting our aperture and getting the exposure correct on this light source. Now we want to keep this light at full power because we're going to be bringing in an eye light later, and I'll kind of explain that once we get the ice light in here. So to make that happen, what we're going to do is bring in an ND filter and a matte box so that we can open up our lens to get that nice shallow depth of field and blur out the background a little bit. and then bring down the exposure of this overhead light. So for our matte box, we're going to be using the Bright Tangerine Misfit Atom, which is just a clip-on matte box, and I have a step-up ring on the 18 to 35 to get up to that 114 millimeter filter thread. So we'll throw this right on the front. And then for the ND filters, we're using the Tiffin Hot Mirror IR ND filters, and we're using the 0.9 so we can get about 3 stops back on our exposure, which shouldn't bring us to about a 2.8 to a 4 split. So we'll just open this back up again. Right about there is giving us a nice good exposure on our subject. So here we are with the ND filter on, and it gets pretty dark now that we have 3 stops of ND. So we're gonna open up our lens to about a 2.84 split, and that should give us a really nice exposure. Now the next thing that we have to do, since I'm kind of blending into the background, is get a little bit of separation. We're gonna do this by throwing up a backlight overhead, and that's also gonna give me a nice little edge light. So let's go throw that up right now. So for the backlight, we're gonna be using a Westcott Flex 1x2. This is an RGB version, so if you wanted to throw some colors in here to get a little bit of a different background, you can definitely do that with this one. For our look, we're gonna be going very clean, so matching the light color source of our key light as well as our eye light that we're gonna show you later. So we're gonna set this to tungsten, and we wanna get it on the background, so we're gonna get this nice gradient going from the top to the bottom, almost motivating like our key light, and it's also gonna give us a nice rim light on our talent. So we really wanna get this basically right overhead in the back, so we're getting that wall and our subject. So since I have these 2x4s up here, what I'm gonna do is just screw it in through these eye hooks. If you're hanging from a ceiling, you could use some tape or some string, whatever you need to get this thing hanging up above. So for this one, we're gonna be using some V-mount batteries because we don't have any outlets up ahead and we don't wanna be running any cables down. So this is gonna be super simple. We'll plug it in and then just throw it up on top of this wall, sort of behind the other one. Turn that on. Tuck this right up in here. So here we are with the backlight. As you can see, it gives me a really nice rim on my shoulders, giving some separation from the background. Because we don't have a lot of depth and there's not a lot of props and other things in here, we also get a really nice gradient on the background, which adds some dimension and some more interesting look than just a plain flat wall. So if you wanted to, you could also just use this overhead background light because it gives some really nice separation and almost silhouettes your subject, especially if you want to do this sort of like hidden identity kind of talking head where you don't want to see the person's face, but you want to have somebody on camera and some sort of figure in the frame. So this is starting to look really good with our key light and that backlight, getting that nice separation and depth. But one thing I do want to add in though is when we jump in for our close-up, focusing more on the person's face is adding in a little bit of an eye light so we really get that connection with our viewer. So we're getting ready to do our final light here, which is that eye light, just that little bit of detail that takes it to the next level and really brings a connection with your viewer. So when you add in this ice light, it's not gonna be super noticeable in the wider shot. It's really only for that close-up, that really intimate face shot of your subject. So we're gonna move the camera in, getting that tighter shot, and then we'll bring in the light based on where the camera ends up. So now we've got our camera closer to our final spot. And the reason you'd want to do this and move this camera in closer is really for 2 reasons. For one, for me, it's personal preference. I really like having that wider field of view and that more connection and 3-dimensionality of your subject with a wider lens. And the second reason is getting the camera closer means that you can put an eye light right above the lens and get that little detail in their eyes. So here we are with the tighter shot, and comparing this to the last one, obviously you have a tighter frame, it's closer up on my face, so you can see a little bit more of those facial features and the emotion. As you can see with my hands moving around, it's a little more intimate and you really feel engaged with the subject. So now that we're into this closer, tighter shot, let's bring in that eye light and see what we can do. So for the eye light, we're gonna be bringing in an ice light. There's a couple reasons that I wanted to go with this one. One, it has a really nice amount of output. It also is a nice soft source because it's a little bit longer than just doing a point source right above the camera. So I'm gonna throw this up on a C-stand and we're gonna get it right above the lens and then start tweaking it for our eye light. Again, since we're placing stuff above our talent and our camera, we wanna make sure that we're rigging to the right always. So I think we got this light pretty much set up where we want it to be. Let's turn it on and see what it's doing. So as you can see, you're getting some really nice eye lights in my eye, but the one thing that you might notice is that there's a crazy color cast towards the blue color. We're white balanced now to the tungsten lights, which is our key light and the background light. So we need to fix this ice light over to be a tungsten color using some gels. So I actually don't have any CTO gels, so I just took a couple different color gels and blended them together to make this sort of orange looking gel that I rolled into a roll, and now I can just slip it right over the lens. This isn't ideal. You want to usually have the color temperature gels to make it match perfectly, but this works for our setup. So taking that CTO gel and sliding it back on the light, as you can see, it takes that shift from blue into the warmer tones, which is what we want to match with our key light and that background light. So this is our final look using 3 different light sources. We have the Westcott Flex 2x2 as our key light with the grid. We have a 1x2 tungsten overhead, getting us a nice rim light as well as the gradient on the wall. Then we have a Westcott Ice Light with the orange gels on it, giving us a nice eye light to really bring that connection in with our subject. If you guys want to check out any of the gear that we talked about in this lighting breakdown, it's all going to be linked to in the description down below. If you guys enjoyed this video and you want to see more just like it, make sure to let me know by hitting that like button, subscribe for new videos every single week, and I'll see you in the next one.